The voice of Alabama politics. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to this special episode of The Voice of Alabama Politics. I'm your host, Jonathan Barbie, in for Bill Britt. The V recently celebrated its 2-year anniversary, and over the last 2 years, we've interviewed some wonderful guests. Today, we're going to take a look back at some of our best interviews, starting with one of my favorites, Alabama's political historian, Steve Flowers.
You are a man of many hats, and probably no one has more stories about the political greats of Alabama than you do, and you put them all together in one book. Tell us about the book and why you did it.
Well, that's the purpose. I've been around this stuff a while. As I mentioned to you one time before, I'm not that old. I'm 63, which is not that old now, but I've been around this stuff for 50 years. I started paging in the legislature when I was about 12 years old, and I wanted to capture that era of Alabama politics. It was an era when candidates who ran for governor came to the court square with their bands, with the Big Jim Folsom came with the strawberry pickers, George Wallace came with Minnie Pearl, and people came to the square in their overalls, and everybody from the country came, and it was our entertainment. I contend that we in the South, our politicians were our entertainers. Louisiana had Huey Long, Mississippi had Bill Bowe, Georgia had the Talmadges, which were very good. But I'd compare Big Jim Folsom and Wallace with the best of them, and they were a classic era. If you put a picture, I started the book really writing about Big Jim and Wallace, and it went on. I got Heffron, and I also included in the book, I analyzed every governor's race for the last 60 years, since 1946, when Big Jim won his first race. And I go in there and try to explain what I think, why they won. There's several really great races in Alabama political history. Obviously, the 1970 Brewer-Wallace race was a classic, and we covered that very thoroughly. The 78 governor's race, when Bob James came out of the blue and beat Bill Baxley and Jerry Beasley and Albert Brewer, the three Bs. That was a great race. And our more colorful past was probably 20 years ago and earlier. Our politicians in the last 20, 30 years have been more staid. They haven't been quite as colorful. I cover them, but the real heart of the book is the 1950s and 60s and 70s.
Well, if you would, just take a minute or two, maybe share your favorite story or one that comes to mind, or a couple of instances that you can think about.
Big Jim was so uninhibited. If you put a picture in a dictionary and you put Big Jim's picture by the word uninhibited, that'd be the funniest thing. One of the funniest stories when I talk to audiences about Big Jim, which exhibits his uninhibitedness, Big Jim liked to take a drink every now and then, and he liked to go to Mobile, and he'd come back from Mobile. And Alabama during that era was full of textile mills. And we were one of the largest textile industries in the state, and the American Textile Manufacturers Association was meeting in Montgomery. And Big Jim, as governor, was going to welcome to the state. Well, Big Jim had not seen his speech that someone had written for him. He'd been inhibited in Mobile for about a week. And so someone gave him a speech when he got in there to give the welcome to Alabama. He said, "I want to welcome y'all to Alabama Day." And we got 400,000 people employed in the textile industry. It means $50 a day to our economy. 1 out of every 6 people. He said, "I'll be doggone, I didn't know that." Then he threw his speech up in there and says, "Oh, y'all don't want to hear that. Y'all want to hear about how much whiskey Big Jim drinks."
You have, over several years, worked to find a conservative, common sense approach to reforming our broken prison system. I know you've come a long way. Can you give our viewers some idea of where we are and where you hope to take us?
Well, under the plan we presented yesterday to the Prison Task Force, which was approved overwhelmingly by stakeholders from both the right side of the political spectrum as well as the left side, what we came up with is an approach that over the next 5 years, taking our prison system from 192% capacity, taking it all the way down to under 140%. We would lead the nation in that kind of recovery effort as far as reforming our system. Now, that being said, we will not release a single inmate early. And I think that speaks a lot toward as you mentioned, a conservative plan to getting there. We didn't invent this package. It came from the best practices of other states, North Carolina, Texas, Mississippi, and Georgia. They've done this already. We're following their best practices, and I think we have a really good opportunity to make some real reforms in Alabama.
I was speaking with someone the other day, and I heard someone make the comment that said, well, good, let the federal government come in and take it over. They'll have to pay for it. That's not the way it works, is it?
It's not how it works here, and there's two arguments against that. First of all, everyone who I know ran for the legislature this last time, they vowed they were going to be a 10th Amendment candidate, that we're going to stand up and we're going to dare defend our rights as a 10th Amendment state. If we're going to truly be a 10th Amendment state and defend states' rights, then we as a state should fix our own problems and not rely on a federal court to do it for us. Second, no. If a federal court takes over your system, what happens is, as California showed, they will take over your system, they will force you to come up with the revenue, and they will force you to have a mass release of inmates, which is bad for public safety and a budget bankruptcy.
We're talking about a very sensitive subject. In 1999, the Alabama State Legislature passed a bill named after your mother. You lobbied for that bill as a 6-month-old child, probably the youngest lobbyist we've ever had in the state. That bill came about after the death of Rose Church, who had left the hospital early, had been discharged early from the hospital, and sadly died some days later. The bill has served the state for some 15 years, served the women, the men, the children of our state. Recently, a newly elected senator, Larry Stutz, tried to overturn that bill, to have it repealed. What he did not tell his fellow colleagues in the Senate is that Dr. Stutz was in charge of your wife and mother's health care, and that he settled a wrongful death suit as a result. I know this has to be a tender issue for you, but you're very courageous to stand up. How, Mr. Church, did you come to sponsor or to push Rose's Law, and what did it mean to you at the time, and what does it mean to you now?
My wife died on December the 11th of 1998, and it was on a Friday. And because of a number of circumstances, by the following day, I had access to her medical records. And I became stunned because I wondered how somebody who was 36 years old and in reasonably good health could die from childbirth. I mean, we hear about it in third world countries, but we don't really hear about it here in the United States. And
Right.
so I was very surprised. And I looked in her records, and there was a nurse's note that talked about her losing a large amount of blood. I thought, well, let me flip through here and see what the blood tests show from that. And there were no blood tests. And it was confusing to me because I couldn't figure out how they could have possibly had been no blood work done.
So you looked at this situation and said, something needs to be done for women in this type of situation.
That's correct. One of the things I tried to do was address this to try to mirror the federal law, but try to fix what looked to me to be a serious problem in the law. In the instance here, I considered that if blood work were done on admission and discharge from the hospital, something that costs virtually nothing to do, that it would give the doctor the necessary information to determine whether complications were there.
When you came to Montgomery and started speaking with legislators, what happened?
Logan was a month old at that time, and I came bill in hand, had a beautiful old baby carriage that I had her in, and I was carrying a diaper bag and a briefcase and a suit. And I made the rounds, had a couple of sponsors, a House and Senate sponsor for the bill. And I went through and realized the real political dysfunctionality that was the Alabama State House at that time.
Nothing has changed.
Well, it was particularly unique at that point. You had Don Sigelman as governor,
Right.
Democrat. You had Steve Windham, Republican lieutenant governor, and an 1817 split in the Senate between conservatives and liberals. And it was nothing was getting through, and nothing was going to be passed.
But this did pass on bipartisan and unanimously, correct?
Absolutely, and we were able to make it through both houses, and it was the first public signing ceremony that Don Sigelman ever held.
Logan, you were named partially after your mother, Logan Rose Church. You came to Montgomery as a very small child. You hadn't been back. All this has to bring up a lot of feelings for you, a lot of thoughts for you. Can you share with us what this journey has meant to you and all these things that are coming up?
Well, having this all come up again, it brought up a lot of emotions, like you said, that I'd kind of pushed away for a while. A lot of sadness and some anger that's tied into it. I've grown up with an amazing mom, you know, but through it all, there is that curiosity of what would my life have been like, you know, and so it's been a definite roller coaster.
You're watching a special episode of The V. Coming up, you'll hear from Governor Robert Bentley, Secretary of State John Merrill, and former Chief Justice Sue Bell Cobb. Stay tuned.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back. You're watching a special episode of The V. Next, we're going to hear from one of our biggest fans and a guy you see everywhere as he travels the state, and that's Agricultural Commissioner John McMillan.
One of the things that you've worked on is strategic planning. You've brought a lot of parties together to get a real plan together for the state. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's about and how you went about getting that done?
Yes, I will. And Bill, let me say as a follow-up to your first inquiry, we have reached a point now where I thought we were going to be when I got here. We're beyond crisis management, I say, and looking forward. So that's one of the first things that we did was set up a strategic planning session with about 20 stakeholders that we're involved. And that's just on the ag side. That's not in counting a lot of the other things like food processors and pesticides and chemicals and those kind of things. And there's about 20 of those stakeholder groups. But we got together, had a day-long session in Montgomery trying to take a 30,000 look view at everything globally as well as in this country and this state, and then task those stakeholder groups with going back and making recommendations to the steering committee. And we just this week are getting those all those recommendations back, and the steering committee will be looking at them and refining them and coming up with our final draft.
You mentioned globally. I know that you have really looked at expanding Alabama markets outside of our state. Could you tell us a little bit about what you've done in that area?
I can, Bill, and this is something that's a big challenge and a great opportunity. I really feel like in Alabama and beyond, we are entering a golden age in agriculture, particularly with the food, the direct food, like produce, for example. Let's just stick with that. This year in California, because of the drought and water competition out there, they're planting 800,000 acres less of produce in that one state. That demand for produce and the supply is going to have to move to the southeast, where generally we have the water resources, or a lot of it, and this has been going on for about 20 years, is moving to Mexico.
Yeah. One of the things that sort of has been a underreported story is your involvement when we have a natural disaster like the hurricanes we've had. Your office has really had to go into overdrive during those periods, haven't you?
We really have, Bill, and I guess that was the third crisis in addition to personnel and finances, was the terrible tornadoes that we had in Alabama. And our people were responsible for getting out our food safety inspectors and our state veterinarians and attending to the disposal of millions of pounds of frozen foods, meats, and others that we lost, particularly in the TVA areas, Madison County and up in there. And then the poultry industry is so concentrated in North Alabama, we had millions of chickens that had to be disposed of primarily through burial.
Hey, Bill, it's great to be with you as always.
It's great to have you on the show, one of our favorite guests. You've got a lot of things going on right now, not the least of which is a lot of presidential hopefuls. Republicans are coming to Alabama. We've been following this, but nobody closer than you have.
Well, Bill, it's unprecedented. And the reason that it's occurring is because of our involvement in the SEC primary, which is scheduled for Tuesday, March the 1st, 2016. Right after I received the nomination to become the Republican nominee for Secretary of State, Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp contacted me and expressed to me his interest in coordinating an event that would culminate in the SEC primary. And I was really intrigued by what he shared, but I really knew it was something that we needed to look into when I went to a new Secretary of State orientation in Santa Monica, California back in December. It was paid for by the Pew Charitable Trust, and they invited 6 new secretaries and invited 4 senior secretaries to come and to help us in the orientation time. And one of the secretaries I met was a gentleman from Iowa, and he expressed to me that unless an Iowan meets a presidential candidate at least 8 times, they're not going to vote for him. He said they need to sit down and have a personal exchange for 8 different periods. And I said, 8 times? I said, do you know how few people in our state have ever had the privilege to see a candidate for president 1 time, let alone 8 times? I said, you know, I know you got some good people, and there's good people in New Hampshire and in South Carolina, but there's nobody any better than the people in Lee County, Tuscaloosa County, Jefferson County, Coosa County, Cleveland County, Randolph County, you name Lauderdale County, Franklin County, any county in the state. None of their people are better than ours. And our people need a chance to meet these candidates and to evaluate them themselves and to make an informed decision on who they're going to support for the presidency.
I know you've done a lot of things in your office to, to beef up voter registration, make it easier, even though we have some changes. Can you give us some ideas of some of the things that you're working on that will prepare people for voting?
Certainly. The main thing that we did, Bill, was we contacted each legislator, all 140, and we asked the 105 House members, 35 senators, to give us 3 locations in their district where they would like us to go to have an opportunity for voter registration and photo ID cards to be made. They provided us with those different locations, but we also contacted each one of the 67 probate judges and asked them for specific locations in their county where they wanted us to go. We made a commitment that we were going to go to every county in the state by the end of October of this year and have a voter registration drive and a photo identification drive in every county. And some counties we visited multiple times because of the encouragement we've received from the legislative delegation and the probate judges. But we have continued to get more and more folks coming to receive their ID cards and more folks to register to vote.
You've had tremendous success as the mayor. Just over the last couple of years, the job growth here has been tremendous. Remington, 2,000 new jobs. Also 2,000 new jobs you just announced last week coming here with Polaris. Around the state, people are asking, what is the secret to his success?
The secret sauce there. It really is. You have to have a lot of elements put together to do this. You have to have an education system, and education drives your development. First thing people ask you when they come in is, what about your education system? Can you provide me career-ready, college-ready students out of your public elementary and high schools? Do you have a secondary college system that can provide trained technical workers? Do you have a 4-year college that can provide for that and masters beyond that? That's one of the big questions. And then if we bring our executives here, well, they want to put their kids in your schools. So education is key, number one. Secondly, you've got to have an infrastructure. Right now we have an 18-minute average commute to and from work, which is probably one of the best average commutes in the nation for mid-sized cities. But that's one of the things that you have to keep up with on your infrastructure. When Polaris looked at us, they looked at our 10-year capital plan, and that 10-year capital plan lays out what we're going to spend money on roads, on infrastructure, on everything else over the next decade. And they were very impressed with what we had done there. And then your third thing is quality of life. I mean, you've got to have a good quality of life to attract the young professionals here. And those young professionals are people who are job multipliers. They're the ones who come and they work in businesses, but then they start their own businesses and they start other businesses that become job multipliers and provide jobs for future generations.
Now, let's hear from former Chief Justice Sue Bell Cobb, followed by an interview from Governor Robert Bentley.
Our guest today is former Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice Sue Bell Cobb. Chief Justice, thank you for joining us.
Bill, I'm honored to be here.
You have had a storied career as a justice, as a judge, as an advocate. You are still working hard, aren't you?
I am. I care about Alabama, and my life has been about public service, and whether you're paid for it or not, I just believe that to have a better state, all of us have got to work together to improve the state of Alabama.
One of the things that you're working on now, pro bono, is the idea that Alabama knows how to be tough on crime, but can we learn to be smart on crime? Tell us about what you're working on.
As Chief Justice, I sponsored and established the Alabama Public Safety and Sentencing Coalition. We had half Republicans, half Democrats on it, and we presented a legislative effort to the legislature in order in 2010, and they considered it in 2011. And as a result, the whole matter was premised on the fact that Alabama has the most overcrowded prison system in the United States of America. We're almost 200% of capacity, which means we have twice the number of people that the prisons were designed for. And we're also the least funded. You could double what we pay per inmate per day, and it would not reach the national average. Because of that, what it really means is that we're not making our citizens safer. We're wasting tax dollars by the way we sentence, and it's a faith issue as well.
Well, when we send nonviolent offenders into our state prisons, we're sort of giving them an entree or even a PhD into crime, how to commit it and how to get away with it.
Absolutely. And what we have is we have a situation where you take nonviolent offenders, and because of our broad range of sentencing, the fact there's so much discretion, you will have people in prison that committed a much worse offense receive a much lighter sentence than someone that stole a bicycle. So it should be fair. I mean, I think Alabamians want sentencing to be fair, and we want it to be smart. And smart would be a huge expansion of community corrections. Community corrections, having a viable community corrections program in every single county would mean jobs for your local community, and it would mean that the offender is in a work release program, is working, is being drug tested, they're paying victims, they're paying the state back fines and costs, and they're actually working and dealing with the issues that are actually plague them, that cause them to commit crime in the first place.
When you say this is an issue of our faith, tell me what you mean by that.
Well, the Old Testament and the New, it's what we do for the poor. I mean, the emphasis is what we do for the poor. Also, whether it's the Old Testament or the New or any other faith, the emphasis is justice. Justice. Do justice. Walk humbly with your Lord and do justice. And I'm here to tell you, having been Chief Justice, having been a trial judge, having been 12 years on the Court of Criminal Appeals, where I kept thousands of people behind bars, that what we're doing is a system that, because it's so underfunded, that oftentimes the poor get a different result than people of means. And that should, for people of faith, that should be an issue of concern.
Mental health has been an issue that we have had problems with, that we have for decades sort of just tucked people away and ignored what was going on there. You've addressed this situation head on. Can you tell us a little bit about why you did it and how you've accomplished this?
Well, as a physician for years in Tuscaloosa, having seen many of those patients, and also as a legislator, I realized that we really did have a problem with the treatment of the mentally ill and those who have intellectual disabilities. And so we needed to get them out into community settings where they get the best care rather than being institutionalized. And so we've closed down some institutions. We closed down Partlow, and we've closed down 2 other mental hospitals across the state. We've built a new modern facility there in Tuscaloosa at Bryce. And so that's what we've been doing. We are the model. We are really the model for the entire country. The rest of the country looks at us and says, this is the way it should be done. And I'm very proud of our commissioners, what they have done. I'm very proud of all the people who work in mental health. And it's an illness. Mental illness truly is an illness, and we need to treat it that way. And those who have intellectual disabilities, we need to help them also, because everyone has worth.
We live on a road where it's mostly all teachers, and many of them are members of the Alabama Education Association, and they're all Republican.
Right.
And they all voted for you. The teachers' organization has been somewhat demonized, but you've really you've risen above all the partisanship that is out there and tried to help with all the teachers. But do you feel there's been some blowback against teachers that should not have just because of the organization?
I really do. Look, I support our teachers. I support our teachers, our lunchroom workers, our bus drivers. I appreciate what they do for our children every day. It's a hard job. They do a great job. It's a calling. I mean, you wouldn't be a teacher if you didn't feel called to do this, and they love their work. And you know what? We shouldn't blame them for problems in society. They're not the pastor and the parent, and even though they have to be for some of these children. But I want to say that I appreciate our teachers and what they do every day.
What do you think is some of the things you've learned about Alabamians as you travel the state in times of crisis?
Well, I learned really not something that I didn't already know. I already knew what kind of people we had in this state. And when you are placed in a time of crisis, like the greatest natural disaster that's ever hit this state in the tornadoes of 2011, but other things also, I mean, whether it's ice storms or whatever it may be, people look after each other, and they care for each other. And Alabamians just are caring, loving people. And that's why I love Alabama. That's why I love the people of this state, because we do love each other, and we're going to take care of each other. Whether we had a federal government or not, whether we had a penny from the federal government, it wouldn't have mattered, because we still were going to take care of each other.
We believe certainly that you will be reelected. Your popularity is probably greater than any of your predecessors. If you get to serve 8 years as governor, what do you hope to be your legacy having served the state of Alabama?
I want people to always remember one thing, that I loved them. I love the people of this state. And I want to be, no one wants to be number 2 or number 3. I would hate to say that somebody said, you know, he's the 3rd best governor we ever had. I want to be the best governor. Now, I'm not saying that in an egotistical way, but I strive to do the best for the people of this state. Because when you serve the people are going to remember you. And they're going to love you, and I'm going to love them, and I do.
We hope you've enjoyed some of the best interviews we've had over the last 2 years. That's it for the special episode of The V. From the V team, we want to wish you and your family a Happy New Year. May God's blessings come upon you this year, and may you have joy and peace throughout the year. Thanks for watching. I'm Jonathan Barbie.